Good morning, everyone. If you could go ahead and take your seats, we're going to get started. This afternoon. Okay, everybody feel ready? Good morning. Let's go ahead and take our seats, please. I'd like to call the Oregon Transportation Commission annual workshop to order, and Director Garrett, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate this opportunity. You know, I have the privilege of being the director of the Department of Transportation. And today I get to do what is probably my favorite thing of all. Hand out an award named after a former friend and colleague, Mary Olson. So the Mary Olson Award was established in memory of our late colleague and Transportation Commission member. Over the 4+ years that Mary sat as a commissioner, she brought an energy, an intellect, and really an honest and straightforward approach that empowered others to advance their journey, both from a professional side as well as a personal side. This was a woman who touched your life and made you a little bit better. She truly embodied the notion that public service is noble, and you should rise and be an ambassador to public service. So we created the Mary Olson Award, and it seeks to recognize individuals at ODOT that demonstrate those leadership qualities, the qualities of initiative, of innovation, of integrity, and in turn raise the image of the Oregon Department of Transportation. The Mary Olson Award is eligible to all ODOT employees, and as director I have the privilege of selecting the award winners and, as we'll do today, award those to those good folks. I also see this as the highest honor any ODOT employee may receive for their exemplary service and leadership. There are 8 individuals that I will speak to today that truly embody the spirit and the passion for public service that Mary Olson demonstrated each and every day she participated in the transportation conversation. Now, I think we all know that House Bill 2017 dominated the most recent legislative session and certainly dominated the attention of the transportation professionals at the Oregon Department of Transportation. Now, the truth be known, the opportunities and the many moving parts that comprise the 2017 Transportation Funding Bill actually began probably 2 years ago in some fashion or form. Foundations were laid then that were built upon and successfully delivered at the end of the legislative sessions. The individual and the team that I honor today helped provide a critical path to the bill's successful journey, its evolution. And I believe it's more than appropriate to honor the ODOT government relations team who were truly at the tip of the spear to lead the agency effort to inform and eventually help animate House Bill 2017. I'm going to begin with 2 gentlemen that aren't here today because they're actually doing their jobs. They are the federal point for the agency, John Baker and Trevor Sleeman. Both these gentlemen are exceptionally talented, and they are diligent in their duties, and that focus helped shape House Bill 2017. John and Trevor took on the complex challenge of crafting the initial narrative on transportation finance. It was the opening salvo as work groups were broken out and engaged this complex discussion. That narrative included the federal transportation programs, how those funds flow through the various core programs to the state of Oregon. They also provided a primer to the legislative work groups on the fund allocation protocols to the MPOs, the monies that are shared with local governments, as well as the disciplines associated with tolling or value pricing. Put simply, they developed the narrative of how the state investment, should it happen, better position the state of Oregon to leverage and compete for discretionary federal monies. They left no detail unattended, and their insights were integral as they connected all the financial dots to ensure that we advanced the conversation. So it is my pleasure to award both John and Trevor the Mary Olson Award in 2017. Now, As we move to the good folks who are there, there's a line of them. I'm going to ask them to stand as I share their name. And at the end of the day, you'll have everybody standing with their nice award. But you can see the type of individual and the caliber of folks that we have here at the Oregon Department of Transportation. The first person I would ask to stand is Daniel Porter. And for the purposes of today, Mr. Porter is an honorary member of the government relations team. He's our economist. He's our chief lead economist. I'm sure he's got a much more impressive title than lead economist. The bottom line, he is a good man. He's a good person. He truly embodies all the characteristics of a true servant leader. Now, Daniel is one of those quiet, unsung heroes. Well, maybe not so quiet when he is sharing his passion for economic forecasting. Mr. Porter possesses the knack to simplify, to clarify, and to unify conversations and people. He proved it over and over and over again as House Bill 2017 and the many courses of financial actions that evolved over the course of time that changed the distribution, the math, both in the near term and the long term here. He is a go-to person for the agency. I always turn to Dan when I need to trust but verify any economic conversation that the Oregon Department of Transportation engages in. So congratulations, Daniel. Please stay standing. I'm going to turn to Amy Joyce. Amy models an attitude that an effective organization is truly based on trust and effective relationship. She's a person of great principle and acts in accordance with the values of honesty, respect, collaboration, open communication. Amy played a critical role in facilitating several discussions with Legislative Counsel as we needed comprehensive engagement at time and then very surgical refinement of some legislative language. She is wicked smart. She knows how to navigate the legislative waters and the complexities of DMV, and she does that with finesse and grace. She focuses on the interests that underlie issues. She is solutions-oriented, always working to develop options and solutions that satisfy the interests of both sides of a conversation. And this attribute has served us very well, specifically as the new construct of tiered vehicle registration, title fees, developed and morphed over the course of the legislative conversation. Amy makes this agency better. Amy, congratulations. Joanna Robert. Let me begin with a Chinese proverb. One picture is worth 10,000 words. I can't tell you the countless hours Joanna spent capturing the right narrative, the right tenor and tone, the right optics. Joanna has the right stuff here, and she was responsible for capturing the essence of the 176 sections of House Bill 2017 on one page. You may recall this infographic. She not only took that document, but she tailored that document for each legislative district across the state of Oregon, capturing the benefits that accrue in the bill. So each of the 90 legislators could tell their constituents, here's the investment and here's the benefit that comes to you and your community. Joanna promotes critical thinking and discussion as a way to create and shape public policy. She certainly informed and influenced the direction of House Bill 2017 on many levels. Simply put, Joanna Robert expands the view of the possible at the Oregon Department of Transportation. Joanna, congratulations. Katie Thiel. Katie understands that House Bill 2017 embodies the notion that vision and inspiration needs execution. And this notion is not a foreign concept to Miss Katie, as I call her. We grew up together at the Oregon Department of Transportation, to be very honest. She gets the job done. She knows how to craft and execute a plan or a project list or what would become a series of project lists over the course of this conversation. And she does it with superb narrative skill in crafting a concise legislative direction and language. She understands that House Bill 2017 is a long series of opportunities that will be coming at this agency at a very high rate of speed and will need every ounce of our collective wisdom to get through it and deliver on it. Katie's intellect, energy, and focus ensures and continues to ensure that we are nimble and capable of delivering those projects, as she ensured that those projects had the appropriate description, the budgetary detail, and most importantly, the benefits that accrue across the state of Oregon here. I am always inspired by Katie's powerful work ethic as she leaves an indelible mark on me as a director and all of her colleagues at the Oregon Department of Transportation. Katie, thank you. Congratulations. Waylon Buchan. Now, Waylon understood that if you were going to nurture this innovative funding conversation and the various scenarios and ideas and concepts that played themselves out, that would not come from just gazing at financial pieces of paper or numbers, again, associated with the ever-evolving courses of actions. That became the term of the evolution of the projects that embed themselves, projects and programs that embed themselves in House Bill 2017. Waylon knew that he must inform the answers by burying himself into the details of policy and then ask those practical questions. And with the answers of those practical questions, he then crafted a tool to tell the story. Thus was born what I term the ultimate spreadsheet. It informed the ever-changing financial environment associated with House Bill 2017. He was in the right place at the right time to development what was, I believe, a game-changing tool. It was a tool that helped turn financial rhetoric into real dollar amounts and in turn informed the implications to the multimodal transportation system here in the state of Oregon. Lofty goals. House Bill 2017 has lofty goals, there's no question. And there is no question in my mind that Waylon and his work helped cement those goals. And with his great execution and the patience of Job, he informed the financial conversation and the implications every time a number moved in that spreadsheet. Waylon, congratulations and thank you, my friend. Finally, let me turn now to the last award winner. She was our field general. She was the leader and is the leader of this talented team. Leah Horner, please stand up. Leah knows how this organization works, and she knows how to work this organization. Her leadership conveys strategic intent in aligning the various professionals from across the organization to reach a common goal. She created a structure that over this 2-year journey effectively and efficiently guided the agency toward its obligations that would, and eventually the outcome associated with House Bill 2017. What sets Leah apart is just not her ability to visualize the way to success, but the will, the determination, and the resilience to see it through. She's fearless, she is bold, and she embodies the essence of leadership as she is willing to make tough calls, unambiguous calls that have and will continue to advance the state of practice of transportation across the state of Oregon. Leah, congratulations. Thank you for all you do. So, Madam Chair, with that, it is my great privilege and honor to present the professionals of the ODOT Government Relations team as the 2017 Mary Olson Award winners. With that, I hope all will join me in congratulating them. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Director Garrett, I cannot think of another team that should be honored, and you did so in such a great fashion. Having served with Mary and considered her a friend, and I admired her work ethic and her commitment to this agency and to Oregon as a whole, I know that she too would be very proud of the team that was just before us. So with that, I'd like to go on to public comment, and I am without a sheet for individuals who may want to comment. Oh, there we are. Thank you, Lynn. No, not a problem.
She was waiting for last minute.
Yes, exactly. We can play the "Come on down, you're the next contestant" on that. Well, good. Look, we have a taker. All right. Typically, we take. That's fine, sir. If you'd like to. Yep. Please join us. Yes. And are you signed up on this fancy sheet that I have in front of me? Yes. Excellent. So please go ahead and have a seat. State your name for the record. We do ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes, and we do have a timer as well. We're thrilled to have you here today, and so please state your name, and the floor is yours.
There you go. Got it. Okay. Chairwoman Boehne and fellow commissioners, thank you for this opportunity to address the Wickiup Junction overpass failure. My name is John Cunningham. I'm a geotechnical engineer living and working in Portland. You can read about my qualifications and admiration, deep admiration for ODOT in the 3-page letter that I addressed to the chairwoman. And I beg your indulgence for 1 extra minute. Yeah, I am here today to make 1 engineering comment about the overpass failure and 1 recommendation. My speaking here today is important. I can be honest and direct with you because I do not work on ODOT projects. I have no skin in the game. I am not worried about biting the hand that feeds me. I am only here to offer constructive, independent criticism. And I am afraid the Commission and ODOT are getting some wrong feedback. My 1 comment is that all these diatoms that you're going to hear about today did not cause the overpass failure. They did not cause the overpass failure. The lack of a geotechnical engineering stamp on the report, in my opinion, caused the failure. Diatoms are being a bit overhyped to obscure the primary reason the failure occurred. Because we like to protect groups, it is difficult for people inside ODOT and for the consultants they hire to say this. I am not in the group, so I can say it directly to you. Shortly after hearing of the problem, I obtained a copy of the 2015 ODOT Geotechnical Design Report. The report has plenty of data to show that the soils were highly compressible and that the proposed design was problematic. Within 4 hours, using only the limited information in the 2015 report, it was straightforward for me to conclude that the weight of these embankments would squeeze the underlying soils at least 2 feet. This is the type of settlement problem that first-year geotechnical graduate students learn to identify and solve. Without knowing that 1 diatom is in the sediments, a trained geotechnical engineer could easily have concluded this proposed design was problematic. The front page of that 2015 ODOT geotechnical report has 4 signatures and 2 professional stamps. None are registered Oregon geotechnical engineers. Why? This leads to my recommendation. I recommend that the Commission work with ODOT engineering leadership to develop a simple rule to prevent failures like this from occurring again. The rule I propose goes like this. Geotechnical reports shall be managed, signed, and stamped by a registered Oregon geotechnical engineer, period. In summary, it was not the presence of diatoms that caused this failure. It was the absence of an appropriate stamp. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, and we are in receipt of your letter and appreciate your time. If you have further comments at the end of the WikiUp presentation that we have, if you intend to stay with us, you're welcome to comment.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Please.
Commissioners, I guess I am on. I'm Harry Bodine. I'm a resident of unincorporated Washington County, and I'm here today to ask your help on the smallest traffic issue you likely will ever be asked to deal with as members of the Oregon Transportation Commission. It involves signage at the corner of Southwest Beaverton-Hillsdale Highway, which is Oregon 10, and 107th Avenue, a county road, and a private road in the city of Beaverton. If you have the document I brought today, look to Exhibit 2, you'll see the way that the arrows line up next to the traffic lights at that intersection. The left turn and the straight ahead arrows are in one lane, the right turn only lane in another. You know, I've driven in all 50 states and 9 Canadian provinces, and I can tell you that universally, in my experience, the situation is that the left turn arrows by itself and the straight ahead and the right turn arrows are the alternative. What happens at Beaverton and Hillsdale at 107th is that traffic is very slow to enter this intersection because everybody's trying to figure out what the other side's going to do. In other words, it's a game of chicken that goes on, and as a result, I doubt if there are any accidents because everybody's scared to death to get into the thing. And so, why is it this way? My suggestion to you would be that, first of all, ODOT is responsible for this intersection, not the county, not the city. But the city actually maintains this intersection and the traffic lights and signs, as I understand it, under a contract with the Department, the Highway Division. I would simply tell somebody to send a truck out there with 2 workers and a boom with a cherry picker on it, a bucket, and a wrench and a screwdriver, and change the signs. One of which, by the way, it disappeared about 3 or 4 months ago. It just went away. Replace it with 2 signs, which simply would say, left turn yield oncoming traffic. This would take care of the chicken problem. And so I'd love to see something done on this. And the reason I'm here today is, frankly, I don't know who else to go to. I approached the mayor of Beaverton, and his comment was, this was months ago, and I'm paraphrasing now, that this is ODOT's situation, and they're not interested in doing anything about it. That was then. So I hope you'll make a phone call to somebody. If you have any questions, folks, I'd be glad to answer.
Mr. Bovine, I do think that you just made that phone call, so, and we picked up. So I very much appreciate you bringing this to our attention. We are in receipt of the materials that you submitted for us, and we will ask some questions on your behalf and see what we can do.
Really would
as well.
appreciate it, and I know there are a lot of other people who would also.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you for
thank you
making
very
time
much.
to be
You
here
bet.
and for bringing this to our attention.
Okay.
Next, I understand that we have a small group of individuals to talk about the Newburgh-Dundee. I'd like to call up my colleague, Commissioner Stan, if you, I think, are here, as well as we have Councilmember George. We have Dave Hagenberg as well, so please, great to see you all. Whoever would like to lead off. And I do want to please send a message that I have a visit I need to.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Owe him a visit, and I am aware of that. So I look forward to that. And I think, yeah, so if we just had one microphone on your table on at one time, that is going to be helpful, and I'll turn it over to whoever would like to kick us off.
So Chair Boehne, members of the commission, Director Garrett, my name is Dave Hagerberg. I'm Chair of the Yamhill County Parkway Committee. I will tell you, Chair Boehne, that Mayor Andrews this morning asked me to specifically extend his regards and that he looks forward to having that conversation. So thank you, and I will pass that on. I don't know if any of you are surprised that I'm here. It's 29 years this fall since the Yamhill County Parkway Committee was created, and and much to a lot of disdain, I've been chair of this committee for 29 years. And, you know, but I think what it tells you, and the point I make with that, is the Transportation Commission, ODOT, the legislature, the governor's office have an incredible investment in the Newburgh-Dundee bypass. And I think that as a part of that, we know it's not done, and you should expect no less than a partner in that project that is diligent, that was working on it even yet this morning, and that continues to be doing everything that we can to be that type of partner to move this project forward to get it done. So I wanted to make that. I will tell you, and the awards you made with respect to House Bill 2017, we concur in those awards. We're delighted with that legislation. It provides us an opportunity and a pathway to move this project forward. What it did is provide $22 million for engineering. We know that out of project savings from a great job on phase one, there's $10.5 million available for right-of-way. What we also know is that we need to get the project shovel-ready. That means we need to have the funding for both right-of-way and engineering in order to move forward and have opportunities for other grants to build it, to go to Congress. And we know that we've missed a couple opportunities recently. Not anybody's fault, but we need to move forward with shovel-ready status. And we as a Parkway Committee are working really hard of how we partner with you to make that happen. And so I want to go back. Last January, the MWAC sent a letter to the commission, and one of the things they said is that with respect to Newburgh-Dundee bypass, it needs to move into the STIP for all of the right-of-way and all of the engineering to make that happen. And so it is with that thought that we're here to tell you that the Parkway Committee is supportive of the enhanced highway funding concept. You're adding sufficient funds to make that happen. We would be supportive of your putting in well north of $100 million into that. So from that standpoint, we think that's a real opportunity for us to finish projects around the state that have begun but aren't finished. And so that's the first point. The second one is we have noted, and we are supportive of community involvement and of the ACT's involvement in making those project commitments. House Bill 2017 took an enormous amount of effort from communities and from a lot of people, and those acts we think should have a significant voice in how those new dollars are allocated. That's part of an incredible partnership between ODOT, the governor's office, and the communities, and so we would be supportive of that. You know, we continue to have a region that's more and more impacted by the traffic, and I just want to stop now and turn it over first to Commissioner Primazich and then to Councilor George from the Confederated Tribes, and thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. My name is Stan Primazich. I'm Yamhill County Commissioner, and I'm here because I'm trying to speak for my constituents. We have a tremendous opportunity as our county is growing rapidly, a lot of it being forced upon us by the tremendous increase in the cost of living in Portland, driving people out of that area to the adjacent counties, us being immediately south and west of Portland. We have a tremendous growth in Yamhill County. We are a significant producer of wine, as many of you know. 75% of all the wine grapes grown in the state of Oregon are grown in Yamhill County. So it is critical to us to be able to get product to market, to get people to our wineries to enjoy the wonders of Yamhill County wines. With the devastation in Northern California, as you're all aware of from the news, our wine industry is going to feel the impact of that, and we need to be ready. And we have invested, ODOT, the state of Oregon, has invested $250 million into phase one of the bypass. I would hate to see that money wasted. So if we don't complete this bypass, we will have effectively thrown away a lot of money, and I don't think the people of the state of Oregon would appreciate that. I know I as a taxpayer wouldn't, and I know my constituents wouldn't, because they're very dependent on being able to get back and forth to the Portland area. And as more of them are being driven to the suburbs of Yamhill County, because of the cost of living in Portland, they're still working up there, and they need to get back and forth. It is a very, very congested area. Our wine growers are very much impacted by the fact that when people are coming down to their wineries, sitting in a traffic jam for an hour is not a pleasant way to spend the day. So we really urge you to put the money in the STIP to help us get shovel-ready. We're in a catch-22. We can't get federal money until we're shovel-ready. We can't get shovel-ready until the state of Oregon helps us get the dollars to do that. So the $22 million that came in 2017, House Bill 720, 2017, was very important to us. Design and review is important, but right-of-way purchase is critical. So we ask that in the STIP, you put the money in there that we can complete the right-of-way purchase and move forward utilizing that $22 million that's set aside. I know we have an EA now. That money's in there. We have the 10.5. We're working forward to develop that phase 2, but we definitely need your help, and so that's why I'm here. I'm here on behalf of all the citizens of Yamhill County and the state of Oregon who want to come to our beautiful county. Thank you very much for your time this morning. And
in our language, we greet you by saying Flahayim, hello, and Salush Chisan, good morning. Ikanim John George, Tribal Council Secretary for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. Today, it also is, we appreciate your time to hear our testimony here, Chairwoman and Mr. Garrett also. We thank you for your time. And I want to start out by saying I was born and raised in Grand Ronde and in the 60s. And so then traffic was a car every now and then. Today, I live in Gresham, Oregon, out of the Portland metro area. And today I see trains of cars that come. So we look at, today is that we're worried about the economic cost of the congestion of traveling to it. Our casino, the Spirit Mountain Casino, is the #1 entertainment attraction in Oregon. And so with that, our community and the communities of the Central Coast, we look at that and rely on this travel shed to bring tourism to our businesses. And so from there, we're asking that the completing of the entire bypass is important to us as a tribe, and it was important enough for us that we had given $4 million also to the cause of the bypass from our tribe. And from that, and so a complete bypass for us means jobs. Our casino alone is one of the largest employers in our county, and we also employ near 500 employees at our tribal government. So we roughly employ like 2,000 people alone in our community to travel there and to. But our important part is that because we face now a new competition and stuff too up in Washington, ALNA, about from the Portland market, and so we have the Oregon Lottery, and other forms of entertainment in Portland. So our concern is for people that, if they can't get to our destination or our casino, we have a tremendous concern of loss of jobs. Those loss of jobs there, or people, coming to actually support, our business and all the other businesses towards the coast. And through that, that would be a loss. But also when you can't travel or anything, or loss of jobs, it would be cut of jobs, but also cutting of also the things that we need to run our casino. Like the food for, our largest, buffet there too and stuff. So we'd also lose the economic benefits of being able to, people to transport also, or we just couldn't buy that stuff because we would have to cut so many jobs and cut back on on that. So we're very considered with that, for that, and also, you know, the part of again, about asking for the enhancement of funds to bring those, to clear that thing there. I travel, and I even plan just from Gresham because of the bottleneck that we have through there, at least 2 hours just to travel one way from there. And on Fridays, you know, to return, sometimes I would rather stay at work till 7 o'clock, because it usually takes me 3 hours or so just to get home from Grand Ronde. And so I can see, and I concur with the gentleman here too, my colleagues, that, you know, I don't think anybody wants to just sit in traffic. You know, my comment from leaving work is also about, I'm not leaving now. You know, it's just a hurry up and wait, you know, to get home, you know, so I even make points of just to basically stay down with my family in the Grand Ronde area instead of having to travel back and forth. So I thank you.
Are there any questions? Thank you very much for this opportunity once again to continue a partnership discussion.
Absolutely, and it is a large project, as we all know, but to remain committed. And what I think is wonderful is not just the longevity of 29 years of sticking with it to make sure that this project goes forward, but also the commitment of the partnerships that you all represent. And I know the cities are behind you, and it is a very unique partnership, and the uniqueness is also underscored by the longevity of that partnership. So I want to say thank you, and we are committed to making sure that you know, your comments are factored into our decisions, and very much appreciate you making time to be here today. Thank you.
If I might just make one
Please.
other comment, as Dave has indicated, he's been there 29 years. He's worn out a lot of commissioners. I really implore you to not get this done before he wears me out.
Well, I've probably worn out a lot of friends too, but that's okay. People say I'm an expensive friend. Thank you very much, and thank you, Director Garrett,
Thank
for
you.
your staff and the incredible support they provide.
Okay, excellent. Great to see you. Okay, let's see. I have Mayor Scott, I'm going to hold your comments for the next item, and so we'll have the presentation first. Would anyone else in the room like to approach the commission that did not sign up? Okay, we will go on to the next agenda item, and that is a presentation on Wickiup Junction.
Chair Boehne, members of the commission, Director Garrett, my name is Bob Bryant, the region manager for ODOT's Central Oregon region, what we call Region 4. And thank you for the time this morning to share a little bit on the current status of Wickiup Junction. For the public record, I know you're familiar with the project, but I did want to go through a little bit of background. But let me first introduce Della Mosier, who has been the area manager for the Wickiup Junction project during its construction phase. And Chris Carpenter is here from Cornforth, who assisted us this past summer. And I'll ask them to help out here as we go through a quick presentation. Our focus this morning is to share a little bit of the background and talk about the current status of the project, and then bring to you our recommendations moving forward. First of all, with regard to the purpose of the project, you're all familiar, I think, with the importance of US 97 through Central Oregon. With the growth that's occurred in the Lapine, South Deschutes County area, and the resulting impact or increase in traffic volume on US 97, in combination with the increase in rail traffic at the existing at-grade crossing of Wickiup Junction, we've been very interested in looking for a solution to address the last at-grade crossing of BNSF Railroad and US 97 in Oregon. And so in early 2007, we launched into a project to separate grade separate US 97 from BNSF and improve some of the surrounding intersections in this area of US 97. Just some quick background on our timeline for the project. Our project development process started as early as 2007, 2008 with some preliminary engineering to scope a project, much like the gentleman just spoke of a bit ago, with the idea that we would develop a shelf project, not having any construction funding identified for the project. And in 2009, our project team kicked off a project development process, again with the idea that we would develop a shelf-ready solution for this at-grade crossing of BNSF and US 97 at Wickiup Junction. That process continued through 2010, and as part of that, the preliminary engineering included an effort to evaluate the geology and geotechnical subsurface conditions for the project area, and the geotechnical report was essentially completed in 2011. In early 2012, our region project delivery management team requested approval of continued funding through final contract plans for the project. And this effort also included additional subsurface information to support the design effort for the bridge foundation on the project. As part of the design effort continued from 2012 into 2013. In late 2013, the Transportation Commission authorized the project for construction funding. And so we continued then in earnest to develop the design and contract plans, contract documents for the project from 2013 to when the project went to contract in 2015. Certainly, during this time, we were aware of the challenging soils that we were experiencing at the Wickiup Junction area. We knew we had a layer of lacustrine deposit, which is essentially lake bed material. We knew we had a layer of muck that we had to incorporate into the design. In fact, we did a ton of work looking at the seismic resiliency for the bridge design itself, knowing that we had challenging underlying soils. We also did a ton of work to analyze the best way to support the bridge, the type of foundation for the bridge itself. That actually resulted in a change from the original expectation for a steel substructure or superstructure supported by pile footings. Realizing that we had these challenging soils, the design switched from a steel bridge superstructure and pile footings to a concrete bridge with spread footings. In 2015, we went to contract, and construction began early in 2016. Most of the work was completed during that time. Here we are. Our construction timeline, much of the work to build the embankments that would ramp the new alignment for US 97 up to the new bridge was completed in 2016, as were the mechanically stabilized earth walls that would support the bridge abutments themselves. That work also began in the spring of 2016, was completed that construction season. And as much as 95% of that embankment that we began placing in the spring of 2016 was completed by the end of that 2016 construction period. And to finish the project off for the first season, the contractor placed the girders, the beams that would eventually support the deck of the bridge that November of 2016. You'll recall the winter that we had last year between 2016 and 2017, not conducive for the type of work that our contractor was doing on the project. And so basically, there was a stop work, and we basically idled the equipment for the extent of winter. Came back to the project in the spring of this year, 2017. Back in March, the contractor went to work beginning to form the deck on top of the girders. And during that early part of the year, we started doing survey calculations to evaluate where we were at with the project, and noticed early on from the survey data that we'd collected the prior year that there had been an unusual amount of settlement that had occurred over the course of that winter, which raised some red flags for us. And to the point where by May of this year, we issued a stop work order for our contractor until we were able to further evaluate and investigate what it was that was causing the rate of settlement that we were experiencing in our survey observations. Again, it's not unusual for us to have settlement on a project like this, both in terms of the bridge itself. There is a factor designed into typically to our bridge foundation work, and as well our embankment designs would experience typically some level of settlement. What was alarming earlier this year with this project was the increasing rate of settlement that we were experiencing on the project. And because of that, we felt like we needed to do some further investigation in addition to what we had done on the early portions of our project development process to look at what the underlying conditions were that were causing the increasing rate of settlement. And so we brought together immediately a group of professionals from ODOT and FHWA and FHWA Western Federal Lands to evaluate how urgent the situation was with the settlement that we were experiencing, while at the same time we went to bring a outside consulting firm on board, which was Cornforth, that we ended up able to consult with, or contract with, and have assist us in evaluating what the underlying conditions were. And with that, I'm going to ask Della if she could just go into a little more detail in regard to the settlement information that we were receiving and experiencing, and then the investigation that we did over the course of this summer to evaluate what was causing that settlement. So Della, if I could.
Good morning, my name is Della Mosier. I'm an area manager for ODOT Region 4. As Bob said, we observed what we saw was an increasing rate of settlement, which was a red flag warning for us. Typically we would see settlement on projects, but soil mechanics would tell you that most of your consolidation or settlement happens initially in the first phases, and then over time that settlement kind of slows down. So you would get your primary consolidation, as they call it, would happen first, and then once you move into your secondary consolidation, which we would have expected after the winter shutdown, it would start to taper off slightly. When we saw that the rate was actually increasing, that was a red flag warning that we had something very unusual. And so the first step was to assemble this team that was readily available, thanks to our federal highways partners and other statewide ODOT folks that joined us to talk about how to stabilize the settlement. So we quickly wanted to address the safety of the project, having a project that was settling faster and might continue to get even faster at that time was our concern. So mitigating that risk, that initial safety risk, was our first priority. And this team came together and made some initial recommendations quite quickly. Those recommendations are shown, I believe, on the next slide. The recommendation was to provide a specific type of embankment removal. So essentially we unbuilt the embankments to remove the load that we thought might be most exacerbating this increase in settlement rate. At the same time, again, thinking about safety, We were evaluating the bridge elevations. We put in instrumentation that could tell us if the walls were rotating. And we conducted daily inspections of the structures, again, safety being our primary focus. The other decision that was made was to perform additional drill holes. We performed 5 additional borings and installed monitoring equipment. As we were concurrently looking for an external geotechnical consultant to also assist us. So we, again, as we saw this very unusual settlement behavior, we huddled the folks that we had readily available and started collecting data in anticipation of bringing on a third party to review what was happening and provide guidance to us. Those borings went down to about 260 feet. Each of the 5 borings found similar subsurface conditions. The 50-foot thick layer of sand, silty sand, underlain by lacustrine deposits that were around 175 feet thick, and then the 5 borings were terminated in kind of a sandy gravel layer. And so the folks felt like at that point we had had enough data, or at least depth of investigation to depict the subsurface conditions and provide the samples to the consultant that was eventually hired in early July, which was Cornforth. Cornforth took those samples, took the data, and went back to their labs and performed geotechnical testing. And what they found was 50 to 80% that the soils or the material beneath the silty sand layer was comprised of 50 to 80% of diatoms. And so the pictures on the right there show these diatoms, which are essentially dead algae, silica replaced algae. And what's unique about this particular diatomaceous material is that it hasn't been degraded. We have diatomaceous mines in Terrebonne, and these are surficial diatomaceous materials that folks typically, geotechnical engineers, need to mitigate for. In this case, we found, that the lower section of this lake material was comprised of 80% of these perfectly preserved, saturated diatoms, which is, my understanding, is unusual to find this type of diatom that's perfectly preserved, and then the thickness of the diatomaceous deposit, as well as the high content of the diatoms. So for current status, we were able to stabilize the abutments. We were able to collect the data and allow Cornforth a couple months to do some analysis and engineering. And what we have observed is that even though we have removed the embankment loads, the abutments and approach fills are still settling. They continue to settle even though we have unloaded what we thought was exacerbating the increased settlement. And over the summer, the abutments are settling differentially. So on one end, one section might be settling more than the other end, as well as there's a little bit of torque going on. And so the girders are safe, and they can handle a lot of movement based on how they were designed and set, but in the long term, it's unlikely that we'll be able to use the girders in their current condition. So we have, looking at some of the recommendations that Cornforth has provided to provide a lighter load in the future. For a grade separation, we would probably change the alignment, and by changing the alignment, the current position of the abutments and the girders is probably not forward compatible with some of the proposed options. So we will be looking to salvage, to negotiate with the contractor and salvage any and all materials that we can salvage. We have already identified that a significant amount of crushed rock materials that were processed this summer can be used on a nearby preservation project in the Low Pine area next season. Some of the mitigation options that Cornforth proposed are summarized here, and essentially they consist of various options of lightweight fills, lightweight abutments, and lightweight viaducts. Depending on the cost, you can have more viaduct, which is essentially a bridge over land, or you can have more lightweight fill, but they're all varying combinations of these types of options. They're constructible, costs are significantly higher, much higher than the current project that was bid. And then all the mitigation options right now, because we only have a couple months of data, would require extensive supplemental geotechnical investigation for us to help understand what our risk is better and how that material will move over the next 10 or 50 years better, and getting more data to understand that might help us reduce the risks that we have right now making decisions on only a few months of data. Again, this is risk due to the difficulty of predicting the performance of these diatomaceous preserved intact saturated deposits. So some of the mitigation options that Bob will cover here in a few minutes on the specific recommendation in the letter to the OTC include supplemental geotechnical analysis. This analysis is not a science study or anything out of the interest of diatoms. This would be specific analysis to return to the purpose of the project, which is to provide a grade separation over the BNSF Railroad and Wickiup Junction. So by leaving potentially the third bent, which happens to be out of the railroad right-of-way, in place, and add automatic data collection to allow geotechnical experts several months or even years of data to further assess how this material will perform out over time, could help us develop solutions that are potentially cheaper and certainly have a better idea of what the risk would be associated with those. We can also partner with the science and research community for some of that research projects type of work, providing this data that again would help us return to the purpose of the project. And then looking at subsurface mapping, maybe going out a couple miles to evaluate if we realigned slightly to the north or south, could we avoid the extent of the lake deposits? Is there potentially some sort of bedrock dike or other feature that we could take advantage of that could help us achieve the project? The other request is to repurpose the money to, again, come back to the purpose of the project, which is to improve safety in the Wickiup Junction area. We have just north of the railroad, and I apologize, it's difficult to see on this a map, but the stars there talk about Burgess Road, the railroad crossing, Drafter Road, Roslyn Road, which these are all areas that have significant safety concerns. And the Roslyn Road area has been on the state priority index, safety priority index system for the last 3 years, including one fatality at the Roslyn Road intersection. So looking for opportunities to further study safety in that area and provide mid to short-term improvements while we reconcile opportunities for the eventual grade separation. And so with that, I'll turn this back to Bob.
Real quickly, I think just highlighting a couple of the points. First of all, we knew we had lacustrine deposits, lake deposit type material under our project area. That in and of itself is not unusual, even in Central Oregon, to have compressible lake deposit type material to have to design to. And as Della pointed out, diatomaceous soils are not particularly unique or unusual in Central Oregon. We've got diatomaceous mines, and you know, they're quite extensive, both in Central Oregon and South Central Oregon, the Klamath Basin. But to have a saturated bed of perfectly preserved diatoms is not something we would have recognized under the normal geotechnical work that we do in the development of projects like this. We didn't recognize what we had when we, with this project. And so the presence of that deep layer of saturated, unconsolidated diatomaceous material that made up as much as 50 to 80% of the lacustrine deposit was unprecedented in Central Oregon. We had no experience with materials such as this. And as Della pointed out again, if the area would have performed in the range of normal soil mechanics, we likely wouldn't be here today. If it was just the bridge we were talking about, again, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion. We knew what we were designing to, and put a ton of work into making sure that the bridge would be supported on the materials that we were experiencing. With that, I think I'll pause and see if you have any specific questions of either Della or Chris from Cornforth or myself before I wrap back around on the recommendation.
Well, let me start with just a comment, and that this is a difficult conversation, and so I appreciate the candidness and being with us today. We as a public agency hold the people's trust that what we will do is in their best interests and that we will be good stewards of funds and make sure that this sort of situation does not occur. That stated, we do have a situation that has occurred, and we will have failed if we do not learn from this in a way to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So for me, it is finding out those details of things in which we can learn and that we've uncovered as we go forward in other projects to make sure that we can use this to better and strengthen the agency for other projects. I'll turn it to my colleagues, and then I would like you to be prepared. There was the comment about the Oregon licensed engineer, if you would answer that also during this discussion. But please, we could start at the end. Commissioner O'Halloran, if you would like to go first.
It's probably good that you keep the lights off so that you can't see us crying. But I mean, I know that this is not where we want to end up, but I think to Chair Bainey's question that, one, how much money have we spent so far?
We had $17 million appropriated to the project by the commission for project development and construction. Construction was, I think, the authorization was around 13 million total, and we had spent to date about just over 10 million, 10 and a half.
So the remaining project funds are 7 million?
No.
So what is the amount that you're requesting we reprogram today?
It's approximately 3 million.
Okay.
They're just less than $3 million is what remains as a balance on the project.
Okay, so, I mean, obviously, to Chair Bainey's point, we're not left with a lot of great choices here, and feel like we're up against the wall, and so if we vote no, what happens? And are we really given a choice here, I guess is my real question. So the question before the commission is an action item that we decommission this particular project and reprogram funds. So if we oppose that, what happens?
I think we have a significant safety risk if we continue forward and not decommission this particular project. I think we can decouple the conversation around what would be the next steps and have a conversation, but today would be what option would we like to go forward. There's further monitoring, we could be looking at other out of that project area, ways in which we would continue forward with a different location. What is it that I'm going to turn it to you, Bob, to be more specific, but we can take the next steps if we were to have project dollars available as to where we would spend those.
Yep.
So please, Bob.
I think it's just really,
please.
was it avoidable? And I think we had a powerful public comment on that from Mr. Cunningham. And I think, was it avoidable? How do we prevent it from happening again in other places? And we don't like to invest in money that ends up being wasteful. And we're 10 million into it, and with not a good choice and no results that improves transportation. So I know we all feel the same way about this, that no one likes to be in this predicament, but here we are. And how do we prevent it, and how do we move forward in a way that that doesn't continue to invest money that doesn't yield transportation results? And what do we learn from this? Do we change our geotechnical processes to prevent it from happening again? And again, I know we are where we are. our options aren't good. And I think either way, we've got to make a decision here that none of us are going to feel particularly good about. So, and again, I'm not bitching, but we're just kind of in a corner, and it's not. I mean, I feel like either way, we don't have a good position to be in, and I just want to make sure that we learn and find ourselves not in this situation again. So, it's a comment, not a question. I know. Thank you.
And I do want to just let us all know that Mayor Scott from the city of Lapine is here as well to offer comments. So as we have comments or questions for the team, we also will call Mayor Scott up. And then if we have further comments and questions, then we can ask the team to come back up again. So please.
I guess I want to try to draw a distinction between two possible uses of hindsight, which can be a great teacher, but it can also make one overly cautious when facing future problems. I'd like to get your take on what you wish you had done on this project between 2007 and 2015. But that's one of the uses of hindsight. I also want to know, what lessons do you take from this going forward that don't end up causing us to be overly cautious? And I'm sort of think back on the paradigm that we often hear about the lessons of Vietnam. And did we learn the lesson of Vietnam, or did we overlearn the lesson of Vietnam? And that's an interesting debate. But I'd like to hear your take on those two sort of perspectives.
Please. Please respond to Commissioner Lohman's comments about the hindsight and the comments that he's proposed, and then.
Sure, yep.
Great.
Yep, happy to. If we were back in time and looking forward at the process that we went through for developing the project, the thing that we did not do as part of this project was to analyze the static loads resulting from the embankment that was placed on the project. Should we have done that, analyzed the static loads resulting from the embankment? Absolutely. We missed it. We did not do that. We should add specifications in our contract that required us to monitor the placement of that embankment. Even under normal situations where we would expect to have settlement over native materials such as we had here, we would monitor the placement of that embankment so that we knew where we were at as it was being built with regard to the settlement. We didn't do that. We focused a lot on the bridge, both on the seismic resiliency aspect and how to address that, and in fact, seek an exception to what we would normally design into a bridge for seismic resiliency, given the materials that we were building on. And we focused a lot on the foundation for the bridge. We should have focused more analysis on the embankment and the placement of that embankment and the impact that the weight of the embankment would have on those native materials. We didn't do that. So the learning, I think, will be ongoing for us to use this example and others that we've had to look at our geotechnical engineering processes. Director Garrett has already directed us to pull together a team of professionals from outside the agency to look at what our current practice is and how we could shore up what that practice, what our geotechnical engineering practices are, which could address the earlier question about engineer of record and licensing and who we have involved in those projects. I think the unique aspects here, there's a lot we know today that we didn't know when we went to contract in late 2015, but there's a lot that we still don't know about the materials that, that we experienced at Wickiup Junction. And we can't say for sure that if we would have recognized it sooner, where we would be today. I mean, I think there are measures that you take when you anticipate levels of settlement that we could have done on this project and ended up being right back in the same spot. We did not recognize and wouldn't normally use the type of analysis that was necessary to determine what we had in the lacustrine deposits here on projects in Oregon. Should we? That would be the work that I think we would look at moving forward. Is you know, we develop a lot of projects. What level of geotechnical engineering analysis, what level of investment do we put into those projects? And should there be a threshold that would trigger a higher level of investment for some projects perhaps than others, or do we do it for all projects? I think all of those are questions to be answered as Director Garrett has asked us to pull together that panel of experts to evaluate, again, both our current practices as well as, and more particularly, what those processes should look like moving forward.
Could I just follow? I appreciate that answer. I guess my non-engineering perspective on this is to want to make sure that we don't overlearn the lesson. That maybe the answer is every time in the future we always have a geotechnical engineer's stamp, but I suspect that isn't necessary in every case, and that judgment's going to have to be exercised in figuring out what those parameters are is the real challenge, and that you're moving ahead to address that challenge. Similarly, I could imagine saying we are always going to have engineering peer review, but that adds the costs and times for projects. And again, I think at some point we can't be that cautious to say that every time we will always do X. That there are times when we need to understand that it's very prudent to do X. Other times it's not prudent to do X. And that's the judgment part of engineering, I think, and is never going to be perfect.
Chair Boehne, to Commissioner Lohman's point, could I ask Chris from Cornforth just to share a little bit about what they observed in their investigation this summer that sort of emphasizes the unique aspect of the materials? We could save that, or
I think we're going to, this will be a delicate balance of time, so we'll, Commissioner Simpson, if you had a quick question, and then we'll go to the next piece, and then Commissioner Brown as well.
Yeah, we'll save the engineering piece for our engineering expert right here. But my question was more around pertaining to the financial hardships. Obviously, the department will have to undergo as a result of this. But the question here is primarily around our client, our vendor, the contractor. What financial hardships are they in at this particular time, given the circumstances?
So we've paid the contractor for their work to date. In fact, entered into some contract change order work for them to unbuild some of the project that we had paid them to build for the project, which has primarily been so far removal of the embankment. And so we're in a good spot right now. The work of the contractor was outstanding. The relationship that we have with the contractor has been very positive. It's a difficult issue, changing condition, if you will. The most difficult, obviously, that any of us had experienced, where we ended up having to ask our contractor to undo work that they had done. But they have been, we've had a very positive relationship in working through that process. And so the work that remains with our contractor is to settle out a completion of the project contract that could include some additional work by the contractor to further decommission, if you will, the improvements that were placed on site. And so that would be additional change order work that we would enter into with the contractor to finalize that. But the expectation is that we would terminate the contract, close out the contract at least, and if we were find a way to come back to Wickiup Junction to achieve the original goals of the project, we'd be looking at a new contract likely for us to be able to continue that, achieve that goal. So all in all, I think, again, I just want to emphasize the work of the contractor was outstanding. Everything was done to specifications. Nothing that the contractor did led to the issues that we have been talking about here this morning.
Great, thanks.
Hear from the consultant, Director Garrett, when we get to close to the end, I'd like to hear your comments as well, and in particular, the pieces that we missed and process within the agency as we go forward too. So we'll hear from the consultant, Commissioner Brown, and then I think at that point, I'd like the mayor to come up and comment, and then we can wrap this back with Director Garrett. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Boehne. So regarding what we found, ODOT performed some investigations and drilled down 260 feet. And in the process of looking at the samples that they collected, we identified some characteristics of the sample: a high compressibility, a high water content. So there's 3 times as much water as there is soil material, solid material in some of these samples. High plasticity, so it's very elastic material. And so those sort of tests that we did in our lab raised concerns about the characteristics of the material. It didn't perform like a normal soil like you would find in the valley here, or a decomposed basalt type of material that you would find in the surface over in the bend area. And so knowing that type of characteristics of the soil, we started looking at some more sophisticated tests to further evaluate what the material contained. Was it organic material? Was it this diatomaceous material? Was it some sort of special clay mineral that has water affinity to water? And so that's where we performed the X-ray diffraction and scanning electron microscope to evaluate what those characteristics were, along with performing normal geotechnical soil mechanics analyses of the samples. So in that process, we determined that it is highly compressible, which was observed with the settlement of the structure and the embankments. And we're able to justify or point to reasons why the settlement was occurring. And from that, we developed some mitigation and feasibility options for moving forward with the project. And one of the big things the big thing that is causing the settlement is these large loads of the embankment. Typically, buildings weigh about 125 pounds per cubic foot or square foot, and a foot of soil is roughly approximately the same weight as a building. And so we have 35 feet of embankment fill, which would correspond to a 35-story building placed out there in the valley. That heavy load, spread out, causes a lot of settlement, a lot of stress down deep in the soil due to that aerial extent, which is causing the settlement that has been observed. And so our mitigation options focused on reducing that weight with, as Della was saying, either a viaduct or lightweight fill. And so those were the concepts that we developed.
Questions? Commissioner Brown.
So I think I made the comment before that this is a fascinatingly unique problem. However, I look at your report, Bob, and your responses, so let me be just a little picky. And I'm glad Commissioner Lohman's an attorney and not an engineer, because I guess I'm overly cautious sometimes is a good thing, and I would hope that you'd agree that we should have been overly cautious on this one. So I look at your first report, and it says we expected soils and soil problems and swelling soils and clay and so on, but we didn't actually detect any. So my first question would be, okay, did we go far enough? Hindsight answer is, no, we didn't. But I guess at the time, did we go far enough for normal? The other piece on this, the type of diatomaceous soils and the elasticity and the plasticity that you found is different. It is unique. It's not something that we've seen very often. But I think the responses I heard from you too were after the fact responses of what should we have done during construction, not before construction. So I don't think we've really gotten to our protocols for not letting this happen again. You know, I do agree with Commissioner Lohman that you can always be way too overly cautious and you never do anything, because we're never going to be 100% in every single project. I mean, that's just, even as an engineer, I would never guarantee something, you know, with that level of 100% specificity. But I do think our protocols can be different. So I would ask from a, you know, soils mechanics was something I took as a civil engineer. I'm not a soils engineer, I'm not a geotech, I'm not a structural engineer. But you learn enough of those to be cautious. And it looks like you sort of expected to be more cautious than you were during the design of this. So I think, you know, again, as we look at protocols and what we should do in the future, this is a very site-specific problem. But I think from an ODOT standpoint, those protocols, we need to establish those protocols so that as we go forward with the next round of projects, that we don't have a $15 million mistake. So I sincerely appreciate the level of detail that you've done. We don't have an answer yet, obviously, and I guess that's the big question now is maybe those pile footings, although they'd have to be 200 feet deep, might not have been a bad idea. So there are, and then that's my engineer side of don't solve the problem because I don't know all the information. But I think we need to really look, and Director Garrett will have a chance to speak at this too, we really need to look at those protocols and being overly cautious in some cases. And your report sort of said you thought you should have been. So I appreciate it and thank you. I'm assuming Cornforth has the geotechnical skills that you're looking for. So I just will make that assumption and I'm hoping I'm correct. Thank you.
So this time I'd like to call up Mayor Scott and ask him to share with us his comments. And then if we could be ready in case there were other comments or questions that we might have for the team, that'd be great. Mayor Scott, please.
Okay. Dennis Scott, the mayor of Lapine. We are a little tiny city of 2,000, but there's also another 18, 20,000 surrounding the area, which we have to be accountable for. Let me just say that I have all the respect in the world for the ODOT team and your organization yourself. I'm a New Yorker. I lived in California for a while, and I have to say I'm just ecstatic at the conditions of the road in Oregon. So with that said, I'm here on the benefit of all the citizens, those 20,000 people, the city council, all the people in that area. Are we disappointed? Absolutely. We all have been in big projects. Not everything runs perfectly, but what we have to do is move ahead. And we're building a city. We're only 10 years old. We have a medical center going in, affordable housing going in, stores going in. This was part of our big plan. So yes, we're disappointed, but things happen. I'm all about the future, and that's why I'm here. You guys can figure out what went wrong and what you do next and anything, but as far as being a mayor of a city that's growing, I've got to look at what can be done in the future. Next year, and the city in Lapine has worked with the ODOT team extensively. There's going to be a project going, repaving project all the way from Sun River down to La Pine with streetscape, sidewalks. The city's putting in the landscape, and we've worked diligently with the ODOT people in Region 4, and it's been a pleasure. And I have all the respect in the world for this team. With that said, next year's project, out of this, and I'm taking it back, to the people of La Pine, we want a positive out of a negative. And the positive, and the people of La Pine really didn't care so much about this railroad crossing as safety issues up and down the corridor 97. It's a very extremely dangerous section. As Della Mosier says, there's one fatality. You have 16 businesses plus a major truck stop, that's the only truck stop between Klamath Falls and Bend, that pull out of their 2 driveways. There's only 2 exits for these 16 businesses to come out on 97, with no speed lanes, no extra lanes. I know there's going to be a little bit of funds left over from this project, even after it's decommissioned. I'd like to see just a couple simple little added projects to this project that's going to happen next year. And it's all around safety. I mean, people can wait for a train. There hasn't been, to my knowledge, I think there was a fatality maybe 20 years ago, and that was a truck got stuck on the tracks or something. But there's been major and numerous accidents of coming out of these businesses on these 2 intersections. Since this project is going to take place next year, I don't know what the cost would be, but it can't be anywhere near an overpass cost to put a couple extra turn lanes, speed lanes for the trucks coming out of there. It seems at the right timing. The general public really, it's sorry to say, they're more concerned about pulling out of these projects, these businesses, than going over a 17 million overpass. I know it controls traffic, the traffic flow and everything, but safety, safety, safety. Let's not injure people and do the right thing and just put in a couple simple little lanes. There's room to do it, there's traffic to do it. I mean, there's land to do it there, and we can just add that in, and it's not, I'm sure there's money left over from this project to do that. That's one item. And that's been on the books, I know, for years, as far as that dangerous area up there. It's gonna take years to come up with a new plan for these intersections. But in the meantime, we can at least make it safe for these people to come out of these businesses. And it's also, at the same time, affecting our economic development area up there. We've had 2 major hotel units that want to come in there, but they're afraid of the intersections coming out of these businesses. You can't put 300 people in a motel and have one exit that they all have to come out on 97 when there's also trucks coming out on there. So between the economic development part and the safety part, if there's a few little funds left over to put in a couple turn lanes, the general public in La Pine would be ecstatic because they don't have to worry about it. I live close to that area, and you can just hear brakes squeaking, trying to stop all day long. It's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. The second item I'd love to see, and that's been on the books and off the books and on the books, is La Pine's divided by 1.5 miles or so between downtown La Pine and the upper business section. For people to get to those 2 areas, they have to walk on 97. I know ODOT owns at least 100-foot of right-of-way. Let's put a bike pedestrian path next to the road. It's obvious. I mean, that's, in the construction standpoint, we're gonna have a lot of fill, we're gonna have a lot of material to do this at this point, putting a lighter side on this miserable project. But, I mean, for the protection of the people, nobody wants to see their child. We have one school. We had an elementary school at one end, high school, middle school at the other end. There's no way for these kids to walk or take their bikes unless they're on 97. I don't want my kids on 97. I'm sure none of you would. We don't want our older people walking on 97. It's just such a simple project that the public would be so happy. I care about the image of ODOT, and right now it's not very good. I try to be as positive as I can, but if ODOT would just give a little bit back, and if there's funds left over out of this, I mean, it'd be wonderful. It's safety. I'm worried about safety because, you know, I'm a retired New York policeman. And the worst thing you can do is go to a fatal accident that can be avoided. And I don't want to see a kid, I don't want to see an adult hit on Route 97 for the simple task of putting a bike path along it. When we have the material, we have the land, we have everything. If the city can kick something in, we'd be more than happy to do that. You know, we're a small city, our tax dollars, we don't have a lot of them, but I care about the citizens and I don't want to see anybody hurt. And I'm sorry. That's all I have to say.
Do we have questions for Mayor Scott or comments? Please.
I just want to say I appreciate your constructive approach to this miserable situation.
Yeah, well, things happen.
That's I think, the way we all have to approach it. Thank you.
I don't usually say things happen, but that's a good way of saying it. And I do think that, one, I'm very familiar with that, having grown up in Bend. And I know that this last holiday season along 97 on both sides of Bend were particularly treacherous in terms of fatalities and the weather. And I think the mayor makes a very good point. And Madam Chair, I might maybe suggest that we amend the action item today to include safety improvements along Highway 97 through and around Lapine, which would allow us to consider the mayor's recommendations, and maybe we could have the team come back to us with what that might look like with remaining funds. And I think it does make sense, and that we minimize the amount of funds that we need to use to kind of stabilize the construction work that's been done. So we pause that. We look at how much of the remaining funds do we need to use to kind of seal that project off? And then let's come back with some options, as the mayor has suggested, and see what kind of money it's going to take to do that, and let's move forward. I know we're not going to be able to do all of that today, but I think if we amend the recommendation to consider that, it allows Bob and the team to come back to us with options to consider. So I'm just kind of saying that if we incorporate what the mayor's looking at, we can come back and do it. And I just wanted to get your comment if we're open to that approach.
Thank you.
I do believe that there's a refinement plan, or that there's some work that's being done. I know the county, wearing my county commissioner hat, we may have some options to be able to assist as well. That Drafter Road area that was noted, we have a lot of property in that area. So we've been working with the mayor, and I too want to say thank you for the tone and for you making time to be here today to share with us the thoughts of the area. 20,000 people, and very deeply interested in the safety of their community. So I appreciate your voice.
Thank
So
you.
Bob, comments on what's been presented?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, if I could respond, Chair Boehne, to Commissioner Brown's points. I wanted to just be perfectly clear on this question of, whether we're assessing things from a hindsight, or whether versus what we should have done in foresight. And what I talked about as far as recognizing that we had deep unsaturated soils should have raised enough flags for us to do more information gathering on the front end. We didn't analyze the static loads. We should have. That's not hindsight. That is typical work that we should do. We didn't do it on this project. We focused so much on the bridge. We didn't analyze the static loads as a result of the weight of the embankment, and we should have. That isn't looking back at it. That's every project. When we're building embankments of the size that we had approaching the bridge on this project, that should have been part of it. The portion about the aspect of including a standard specification that included monitoring of the construction of those embankments is standard procedure. We should have done that. We didn't. Again, we missed it when it comes to the embankment. We were so focused on the bridge and wanting to make sure that we checked all the boxes on the design of the bridge and the structure. We didn't pay enough attention to the embankment. And that, again, I just wanted to be very clear. That's not from hindsight. That would be with any project work that we should have done. If I could quickly walk through the recommendations that I think touch on the mayor's points and Commissioner Holland's suggestion. First of all, where are we today? Della mentioned, some of the current status of things. We have a little more work to evaluate around how much more of the project we decommission and what state we leave the site in while we look forward to, kind of what's next. So this question of returning the site to a suitable longer-term condition still needs to be answered. And so the remaining funds, I think I mentioned in the $3 million range, we've estimated that probably half of that will go towards this effort to further decommission the project. We've still got girders in place. As Della mentioned, it looks as if from all the work that's been done and the supplemental work from Cornforth this summer, that it would be very difficult for us to figure out a way, to design a way to utilize the existing mechanically stabilized earth walls and abutments to build a similar bridge in this location with a high enough level of certainty that we would bring that recommendation to you as a commission. It's not that it can't be done. As Chris mentioned, there's use of lightweight materials that could be incorporated that we didn't design to initially. The idea of viaducts are potential. But again, there's not enough evidence or experience in building on these types of diatomaceous materials, saturated, unconsolidated, perfectly preserved silica from diatoms, to be able to bring a recommendation to you to utilize what's out there today with a high level of certainty. But we're still doing that work. We're going to negotiate with the contractor, as I mentioned a little bit ago, for Commissioner Simpson, the termination of this contract. And so part of our request today is that you authorize us to enter into those contract negotiations to close out this contract. And that would be the responsibility of the contract administration engineer for ODOT in conjunction with FHWA. With regard to the remaining funds, part of the request is to revise the STIP and repurpose the remaining construction funds that would have went towards the completion of the project, to further analyze the geotechnical site analysis, to do further investigation, with the idea that understanding better this very unique subsurface condition that we have at Wickiup Junction could better inform us on a recommendation if there is interest in getting back to our original goal of separating US 97 from the railroad tracks. Is there a better location? We don't even know what the extent of these underlying lacustrine deposits are at Wickiup Junction. That further analysis could inform that discussion, and from it bring a recommendation back to the commission on whether there is a an economical way to achieve the original goal of the project. And that would be evaluating alternative alignment options, locations for the bridge, and mapping the extent of that subsurface material. And then the refinement planning that Chair Bainey referenced. We're interested in working, of course, with the City of La Pine and Deschutes County on both short-term and long-term improvements in the area of La Pine and Wickiup Junction and South 97 in Deschutes County to address a lot of the issues, safety issues that the mayor referenced, and whether we could bring those forward as recommendations in a STIP update, or even with the remaining funds here would be part of the request for you to approve today. I think that was it. That's all I had.
Ms. Mosher,
For
did you have a
recommendation.
comment?
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I would add is that the additional geotechnical analysis would really be taking advantage of the existing instrumentation that we have in place that we installed in the initial 5 borings. So a lot of work went into putting in the initial equipment, and the proposal would revolve around creating an automated data collection that we could use to collect data that would go the next several months or even years, just utilizing already previous investment. So it's not a significant future investment. Thank you.
Just to clarify, so we approved 17 million for the project. So we have 13 million, and was it 4 million in engineering? What was could you just explain the breakdown of the 17 million?
Yeah, there's a STIP funding summary in your packet that identifies the amount of engineering work that was programmed and actually.
So we spent, I remember reviewing it, but just to clarify, so we spent
1.6 for engineering.
Okay.
We spent some on right-of-way. Most of it was public land BLM.
Okay.
But $750,000 on right-of-way.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. So if we're going forward, I mean, and to the mayor's request, I mean, it seems to me like we want to minimize the amount of money we have to spend to tie off this project, and it doesn't look particularly promising that down the road that this terrain is going to be conducive to doing a project here. It's not going to change, maybe over the next 1,000 years it will, but not in our immediate future. So, I mean, it seems like we ought to tie this off, move forward, and then, and maybe it's another pot of money or another way to address it, but I think we ought to come back and look at what the mayor's offering, and is there a way for us to be supportive of that and along that corridor? So and maybe it's not this pot of money, and maybe we don't amend it, but I do think he's come forward with a legitimate request that we should look at.
And I think it's important to note that there's also work being done in this corridor this next season. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. As Dilla mentioned, we have or as the mayor mentioned, actually, we have a pavement preservation project that affords an opportunity for us to look at, again, shorter term, smaller type investments that could enhance safety in the corridor at some of the intersections that the mayor referenced as part of that project. And would do that, could do that, would plan on doing that as far as any refinement planning effort. So we'd, again, not want to lose track of our original goal of grade separating BNSF from US 97 from the railroad. But in addition to further evaluating alternatives that we could at least share with the commission, we could look at, again, those short-term safety improvements as enhancements that could be made part of the pavement preservation that's currently programmed.
So, Madam Chair, in the interest of moving on, do we need to amend this action item to include those safety recommendations, at least to consider it as the mayor suggested, or is this separate?
I think they would be, we need to close out the project itself or give recommendations for movement forward, and then if you could walk us through what would be the next steps for working with a refinement plan, or do you feel that it's all packaged together?
I think it's somewhat packaged together. I mean, I think the work that we have to decommission the project is, other than the commission's concurrence in us moving forward with that process, so that we could authorize, so that you could authorize ODOT to move forward with closing out the contract.
There is an asterisk, though, that's actually here around the embankments and some cost savings as well. So I
Yeah.
think what I'm hearing from the commission, and I'll wait until I also hear other commission members that are interested in this direction, we would try to minimize those costs as best we can so that we can utilize those in the safety needs that have been identified today and other ones which may be identified in the future.
Yes, I think all of that. I think, you know, we've got additional work to do, and we would look for concurrence from FHWA on any additional work that we do to decommission or remove aspects of the project. And so we're not, you know, we haven't specified in detail what that would look like. There may be some advantage of leaving some of the embankment out to, in place to further evaluate and understand how materials perform under those kinds of loads in these kinds of conditions in the future. And we haven't, you know, we really haven't explored the value of the learning that we could still experience from what's out there today. Balanced with, you know, a conversation that we'll need to have with our neighboring public landowners in the area, BLM, for example, on, you know, where they would like to leave, in what condition they would like to see us leave the project site in. And of course, the railroad itself is an interested stakeholder in the outcome of that conversation. So, so we have further work to do, again, in cooperation and in conjunction with FHWA and exploring what that process looks like. And then in terms of refining additional work in the area of Wickiup Junction, likewise, I think, you know, we would be looking at a scoping effort that would define sort of what the extent of that refinement plan could include, and again, seek concurrence from FHWA, especially if we were using the remaining funds on this project as the funding mechanism for enabling us to do that work. So what's in and what's out would be part of that scoping effort that we could bring back to the commission at some point in the future as a recommendation, once we've got that detail worked out, which we do not have today.
So I think we, and in a conversation we had here, I think you just got to come back and say what it's going to look like. And we need to know what the refinement plan is and kind of how it's going to be there. But in the interest of moving forward, Madam Chair, and with your indulgence, I might request that we do a minor amendment to this that would allow at least the option to consider some of what the mayor has requested. And accordingly, I would request that we approve approval of the decommissioning of the US Highway 97 at Wickiup Junction, Lapine project, and use the remaining funds for further geotechnical site analysis, transportation refinement planning, and to scope short-term and long-term alternative improvements, and to consider safety improvements along Highway 97 through and around Lapine, including bike ped, as the mayor suggested. So.
Further comments? I know that Commissioner Brown, you had a comment. Would you like to go ahead?
Just, I think we're asking too much with the money that's remaining. Mayor, I totally respect what you want, and I would almost, you know, maybe we should do a separate motion to address the concerns from the mayor, because your points are extremely valid. My comment here is when we get the ACT member up is, how do we establish those priorities? Your priority is safety in general. ODOT's priority here is grade separation. So I think we need to truly address your priorities from a safety standpoint to include bike ped and a potential shared bike path. But I think that's, it appears to me, it feels to me that that's separate from this project. And I think with only, and clarify this, Bob, it appears that your remaining funds are 1.3 million, not 3 as you mentioned. And
Correct,
with
yes.
1.3 million, you don't have a whole lot to play with once you talk to the railroad. So I don't think tying this, the mayor's concerns with safety, I think we'll run out of money before we even get to the mayor's concerns. So I don't want to overlook his concerns, and I'd rather take that up as a separate motion. I'm happy to vote on this and say yes, but I think we would lose the impact that you want to make, Commissioner O'Halloran, by adding to this motion.
Yeah, and Commissioner Brown, I agree with you that this feels like too big a bite, and I agree there. And all I would say is that we consider safety improvements, and I realize that that's probably another bucket of money, and that there's also regional considerations on how things are prioritized, et cetera, in the area. And so I don't by any means want to supersede those considerations and regional prioritization, et cetera. But I just think that, to the mayor's point, if we just say consider it, it allows us to at least make sure that we're keeping an eye on it, and that, Bob, you and your team come back and say, here's what we ought to do, here's what the act is recommending, here's what with the mayor's input, and I want to make sure his voice is heard, that the impact on that particular segment of 97 is not ignored. I realize we're well over time here on this, but we don't typically have to swallow a $10 million pill. And so I realize it's worthy of consideration, not what we want to do. And I'm just saying that I'm happy to withdraw my amendment, and it just under consideration, keeping the language in place. So let's move forward. It is pending, so it's under consideration, and I would just ask that we call the question.
Chair Boehne, members of the commission, just to draw some clarity, if I could draw your attention to the last paragraph under recommendations in the letter in your packet, speaks to this topic, and the idea of what you would be approving is described there. The results of the geotechnical and transportation current and forthcoming studies would be used to formulate recommendations to bring back to the Transportation Commission for future consideration. The recommendations may be used to develop a scope of work for a future STIP project to complete selected improvements, not to exclude or and particularly include short-term improvements that could be included as part of that preservation projects. But what we're talking about really here is a refinement plan. We're not talking about building anything with the remaining funds necessarily. It would be used to scope what we would come back with in terms of a recommendation for further investment in the area of Lapine and Wickiup Junction. And clearly, you know, that could include, again, the original goal of the project, an alternative for achieving a grade separation of US 97 from BNSF. But we would, what we've anticipated is that we would also at the same time want to look at short-term safety improvements in the area that could be made part of our pavement preservation project that's currently programmed.
And I think we may get there as well with some of those safety pieces that the mayor mentioned, because if we, and when we do have accidents, that stacking that then leads out onto that area. So it could be one and the same, where we're still getting some safety improvements for that at-grade crossing in some of those noted improvements as well. So I think we leave the motion as it is if with that clarification, and I would check with the commission if that meets the needs. Okay, all right, so all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Director Garrett, if you have comments, I think that would be great, but then also I think a follow-up on this one in terms of, you know, protocols and lessons learned and things in which going forward. And then I know that Mr. Cunningham has left, but I very much appreciated his comments and would hope that he also, you know, seems interested and knowledgeable. If he wanted to also give us further comments, that would be welcomed as well. But Director Garrett.
Madam Chair, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for, I think, the scrutiny and just the honesty of the conversation from the Commission. I think you've certainly touched on not only the emotion and the sting of this. I think Commissioner O'Halloran said it best. We have spent $10 million plus without achieving an outcome. This agency has failed in this project. It also should be noted that we failed in probably the highest calling as a public agency, and our stewardship responsibility, right? And that stings, and that will inform, I think, the direction that was spoken to in terms of bringing an independent set of eyes with our federal highway partners to review the geotech practices at the agency over the course of this project. Were those geotech practices adhered to? If they weren't, why? If they don't exist, why not? I mean, that level of scrutiny. So it's comprehensive in terms of the rigor that I have asked for to bring this independent set of eyes in here to look at really the knowns going backwards and then forming the unknowns, because that will change, that lessons learned will change, I think, the way we do business as an agency. And there's the inflection point, right? It may be structural. It may deal with what Mr. Cunningham put on the table as a legitimate issue, and Commissioner Lohman certainly broached issues that cascade from that. But in terms of the appropriate eyes and the stamps, the peer reviews, that protocol and discipline, are we advancing the state of practice? Are we engaged in the best practices in geotech? Those are legitimate questions. They must move us to understand what's happening today, in the past, but more importantly, into the future. And I think Mayor Scott is spot on. The safety exposure in La Pine is real. He's articulated a host of these issues. And I think the motion that was just passed will allow us to address in that comprehensive sense everything that was discussed today. And we will be better for it as an organization, because you know what? We are better than this as an organization. And we have failed on several different spots. We will be judged of how we recover and move forward and prevent this from happening again. And that is the discipline I'm trying to bring to this organization from the outside to complement the professionals of ODOT, who I think understand that we're a better organization than what we've demonstrated with Wikia. So I think with that, Madam Chair, I'll stand down.
Thank you. Let me say to Ms. Mosier, Mr. Bryant, and to the team, this is a difficult conversation, and I would suspect that not one that you were looking forward to today. I think you handled it with professionalism, and I think you handled it in a transparent and accountable fashion, and I want to say thank you very much. Mayor Scott, thank you for making the trip. Great to see you again, and more to come. And so thank you for the partnership, and also for those that are here in the room. I misjudged the time that this conversation would take, but as you can tell, it was one that was important to us, and so I know the agenda is running a little bit behind, so I just ask you for your patience. And with that, we'll go on to the next item. Thank you. Next, we have a discussion to allow authority under ORS rules to solicit proposals and negotiate agreements for potential public-private partnership for developing and implementing a tolling technology. So we will move on to something a little lighter. Tolling, of course, everyone loves in the state of Oregon, so let's go there.
Good morning or good afternoon, Chair Boehne, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Erica Dinsdale, and I'm ODOT's Chief Innovation Officer. I'm joined here today by Art James, our Innovative Partnership Program Manager, and Catherine Jones, our Innovative Programs Project Manager. And today we're asking you to enroll open architecture tolling into the Oregon Innovative Partnership Program. There we go. As you know, Section 120 of House Bill 2017 requires ODOT to submit approval for value pricing to FHWA by December of 2018. In your August meeting, you heard an update on the Region 1 feasibility study and the Policy Advisory Committee in the Portland region. We have this overall effort divided into several work streams, but today we're going to focus on the technology and back office functions work stream. the parts of the potential tolling system that have to do with capturing data from vehicles, processing that data, and completing the billing cycle. In our presentation today, we're going to cover what is the Oregon Innovative Partnership Program, what open architecture is and why we are pursuing it, and then finally our recommendations to you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Art.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Art James with the Office of Innovative Partnerships. Some of you may be more familiar with this program than others, so I'm just going to give a high-level overview of the program, and then Catherine will go into specifics about the request this morning. The Innovative Partnership Program was established by the legislature to develop partnerships with private entities in innovative ways. It's really an important tool in ODOT's toolbox to engage the private sector in ways that are different from our normal contracting processes. The objective is to maximize entrepreneurship and project development and to expedite project delivery, and where possible to try to leverage public financing with private sources of capital where we can. The definition of a transportation project in the OIPP statute is exceedingly broad. It says any proposed or existing undertaking that facilitates any mode of transportation. So we've used this authority in a broad spectrum of projects, anywhere from highways, bridges, rail, ports. We're even developing some telecommunication projects right now, and maybe in front of you again in the near future with some other innovative ideas that we have. The program allows for both solicited projects, and that's what we're asking for today, is authority to solicit proposals on a particular project. It also provides authority for unsolicited proposals that go through a very rigorous vetting process when they come in. Some of you survived the Kugler Interchange unsolicited proposal, and so that's the only one we've had in 10 years of the Innovative Partnership Program, and didn't come out with a great outcome. But our solicited projects have been very successful, and I'll tell you about a few of them that ODOT has been given awards for. The project proposals are submitted by private firms. It allows private partners to come in early stages of the project. It's very different from our standard design bid build. It allows kind of the partnership to be in the project development phases. It allows proposals to be selected by best value as opposed to least cost. And through this program, the OTC is involved in several stages of the project development. So number one, basically what we're asking today is to enroll this project in OIPP and giving us the authority to solicit proposals and to evaluate those proposals. We will then, if we find something that has merit, negotiate agreements. There's an interim step in between the negotiation and number 5 there, where DOJ reviews any agreements that we enter into for legal sufficiency. Then we bring those agreements back to the OTC for final approval before the project can be implemented. Major provisions of the OIPP law: it allows for public-private partnerships that are governed by negotiated agreements. There are protections within the law that protect private entities, their proprietary business information or trade secrets, that type of thing. There are extensive Oregon administrative rules that govern how we execute the project. And a major portion of this is it exempts ODOT from a lot of the provisions of ORS Chapter 279, which is the public contracting law. Exempts essentially that process can be very rigid and time-consuming at times, and it fits very well for most public works type projects because both the public owners and the contracting community understand that marketplace and use it well, but there are some projects that just don't fit that mold very well, and the Innovative Partnership Program allows us to be more flexible and nimble to address those types of projects. Also requires consultation with local governments and consistency with local, regional, and state planning efforts. Some of the projects, just as examples that you may be familiar with, the Solar Highway project was a great partnership that we entered into with Portland General Electric. They put in solar arrays on ODOT right-of-way. The one depicted here is a rest area off of I-5, 1.7 megawatt array, and a project that has gained national and international recognition for creatively using ODOT right-of-way to generate revenue. The second project there, the West Coast Electric Highway, is one that I was integrally involved in. We did a partnership with a firm to put in charging stations around the state. And Oregon now has some of the most robust charging infrastructure per capita of any state in the nation because of that project. And the Origo project, one of the features of OIPP is it allows us to negotiate with multiple entities. And you're familiar with Origo. We have several different contract administrators for that project, and we couldn't have gotten there without having enrolled that in OIPP. So as I said, we're going to talk to you about a particular project today. There are other ones that I hope to be able to bring forward to you, but I'll turn it over to Catherine now to talk about today's request.
Members of the Commission, my name is Catherine Jones, and I'm with the Office of Innovation in ODOT, and it's my job to tell you what in the world we mean when we say open architecture tolling. Here is a list of states, those that are highlighted, that currently do tolling. We have reached out to every single one of them. We continue to man our 2-person call center out of the Office of Innovation to reach out to every single tolling authority and tolling system. We want to know what worked, what didn't work, what recommendations they had, what successes they had, and how administration is different than what they may have pictured during project build. We really want Oregon to walk into this with eyes wide open in the tolling world. We are also very closely working with our partners in Washington. We've met with them several times, and we continue to gather lessons learned from them as well as advice and just build a really good rapport with them. Before we kind of go into what we learned from other states and other systems, I think it's important to learn how a typical tolling system operates in the United States. There are some deviations, but as an aggregate, this is how they usually look. So there are 2 main contracts typically with the tolling system. One is for the system provider. The system provider will collect the data from the vehicle as soon as they hit the gantry, that like read a toll tag, or they'll take a picture of the license plate. They gather that data and then they send it to a back office system. And a back office system is where most of the work occurs. That's where account management will occur, billing, inventory for the toll tags, image processing, which is a large portion of each contract for each state. That means that they go through the license plate images and they read and they try to identify the vehicle owner. And customer service. Customer service usually takes 2 forms. One is a call center, and the other is a walk-in facility where people can go and ask questions face-to-face or pay cash for their tolls. The back office system contractor then sends money to the state. After talking to states, we begin to see similar themes emerge. One of them is that it's difficult contract management. Though that system looks very simple, it's a lot of data and a lot of money being transferred between private entities. And Virginia referred to this as a black box type of contract management. And states typically have very little insight into how their system works. And so when a contractor wants to raise costs for a system upgrade, they don't know if the cost that they quoted is accurate, and they don't know if that system upgrade is necessary. Another theme that we heard is high administrative costs or operating expenses for the toll system. With a closed system, there's very little incentive to compete, to drive down costs, or innovate. It's also incredibly difficult and expensive to recontract with a new company to manage the system that was custom built by another. So if you don't like your current contractor, you're kind of stuck unless you want to spend a lot of money to get another one. There's interoperability problems right now with tolling systems. So there is a federal mandate that tolling systems should be interoperable by October 2016. They've missed that goal. States are not interoperable except through a very manual process of emailing and spreadsheets, and back office systems among states don't talk. Furthermore, technology is leapfrogging what is used in the tolling world, and tolling technology is currently very far behind the concept of connected vehicle. And the more connected vehicles that we get on our roadways, the toll tag will probably very quickly go the way of the toll booth. People wanted a connected transportation experience, and the tolling industry and the toll tag simply don't provide that. You get one toll tag, you have one toll count, it pays tolls, and that's it. So ODOT is coming to tolling at a very interesting time. Instead of developing a system that is based on toll industry convenience or on state convenience, we have the opportunity to build a system that makes user experience paramount by creating a technology-agnostic tolling system, an open system. This would allow any certified toll tag or GPS device, such as a roadside assistance companies, insurance devices, or embedded vehicle telematics, to be used to transfer tolling information to a back-end system, and this is how it would work. We would geofence the tolling area. A geofence is a virtual boundary that can be of any scale or type. And in-vehicle technology detects the boundary of a toll and charges a toll rate to that person's account. Account management could be handled by several or multiple private sector companies that already have these systems in place and already have this technology in place. Oregon would simply interface with them. We are meeting, with this type of system, we would meet our customers where they are, with the devices and services that they already want, and bundle tolling with them. ODOT would establish the interface protocols so any private sector company or another state could connect and talk to our system. And it's not tied to one contractor. It's tied to a competitive, open marketplace. We had this idea. Orgo is based on this type of a principle. We went out to our sister states and we've been asking them. We went out with a request for information to the private sector to see what they thought about it. What we got was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of about times. But there is some trepidation because they don't know exactly the roles that they each are going to play and how this would actually roll out. As with any decision, there are pros and cons. If we went with a typical tolling standard, if we implemented tolling in Oregon, as the other state has done, everybody knows what role they have to play. Government knows what role we have to play, the contractor knows what role they have to play, and the public can kind of guess what role they can expect. It's predictable, and we can easily replicate other systems. The driving forces, however, while we really want to pursue or at least research open architecture tolling, are numerous. Paramount, it provides users with choice. This will allow them to bundle tolling with something that they want, like roadside assistance or insurance, or just connected to their vehicle. It allows them to just put tolling on top of that and with that. Furthermore, it allows to leverage technology today that would continue to change in the future. The system is flexible. Because the private market and users, not government and the tolling industry, are driving how the system functions, it is much more agile and adaptable to new vehicle technology as soon as it enters the market. All we care in ODOT is that we get the information. How they want to get that information, what technology they use, can constantly change as the marketplace changes. It would also allow us to be more interoperable and provide the ability to talk to state systems by creating an interface protocols, and so there's no manual transmission of data between us and another state. It also allows us to use the Orgo platform to geofence an area and to charge tolling. This will also allow for increased competition between private sector private sector companies, because essentially what we're doing is we're breaking up the back office system, that one contract that was so massive in other states. We're breaking that up, and that's a huge cost to other states, and we're giving it out to the private sector and to the competitive market. Account management, billing, customer service, that would be managed by the private sector partner. It would be difficult for one private sector partner to raise administrative costs very high, because we could easily pulse check the other players in the market to see if that's a justifiable expense. At the end of the day, we have a lot to learn. The paths to create a closed or an open system are remarkably parallel for about the next year, so no decision needs to be made today. We still need to gather requirements, which would be true either in an open or a closed system, such as treasury, tolling accounts, data security, and all that. So with that, I'm turning it back over to Erica.
So Oregon is coming into this topic, as Catherine mentioned, at just a really exciting time, a time when we can leverage the possibility of vehicles and the amount of data and information, the way that all of us interact with the world around us, with our smartphones, and put together the right way to deliver a potential tolling operation for the citizens of Oregon as the legislature is asking us to consider. Open architecture tolling holds a lot of promise to alleviate the issues of our current tolling practices, but it's also never been done before. And so what we'd like to do is further investigate this possibility so that we can then recommend to you to choose an open or a closed system. Art gave you an overview of enrolling OIPP projects, and with your approval, ODOT would like to enroll this as an OIPP project to know if open architecture tolling is doable. We need to know more about the costs, both for project startup and long-term operations. We need to know more about where those interfaces would be between various companies, between us, between our sister state partners. We have a lot to learn about, and a lot about what the private sector is willing to support. If approved as a project, ODOT would move to obtain a vendor that would help us and be our subject matter experts gather the system requirements, develop a common system, a concept of operations for open tolling, which would then help us communicate what the system is and what it does. We would also like the vendor that can talk to his peers and help get them excited and gauge their willingness to come play with us. We, of course, will continue to work very closely with our sister states to capitalize on their lessons learned and also provide regular updates to you. And so with that, we are requesting that the OTC finds that enrolling Open Architecture Tolling Technologies project into the Oregon Innovative Partnership Program will have the potential to accelerate delivery and promote innovative approaches to carrying out this project. And with that, any questions and discussion?
Do we have questions? It was a great presentation. Please, Paula.
So I asked this once before, what's the downside?
Katie?
The downside is this hasn't been done before in the tolling world. And so we're going into eyes wide open. Another issue is that we're going to gauge our interest in the private sector. We're definitely, like with Orga, when we launched Orga, we realized that we had to cultivate the private market and kind of educate them about what we need and what the possibilities are. So I'd say that right now the unknown is the downside.
But may I follow up? But as far as we enroll this into the program, if it doesn't work, we haven't lost anything, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I mean, and just for clarity, we are not making a decision here to toll. We are allowing them the authority to look at how it could be done.
Yes.
And they've looked at other states, and I think our neighbors to the north, Washington State, has implemented a very effective system. I think, we need to look at that, and we need to look at how it is working there and what the technologies are. So I think just to clarify that with all the froth that can come around the conversations of tolling, that what we're allowing our Office of Innovation to do is to explore the innovative technologies should we choose to move forward with tolling. So,
Thank you for that clarification. I think that's an important one. Commissioner Lohman?
Well, just to add to that, I think actually ODOT could look at innovative ideas, but what we're authorizing them to do is to use this particular procurement device, which is non-standard, but allowed by the legislature for this type of a project. And from that standpoint, given all the uncertainties, it makes an awful lot of sense to use this innovative procurement technique. And I guess I also want to say, I think it makes an awful lot of sense to be trying to build on what we have launched in the road user charge initiatives in terms of open architecture and interoperability and so on, and things that I think we have, as a state, learned a lot that other states haven't had an opportunity to learn, and we can build on that now and become even more of a leader in this arena.
Very good. And I would suspect that it would include the equity components and such that we'd make sure from a statewide perspective. So I would welcome a motion if we feel ready.
Madam Chair, I move to give the authority to ODOT under Administrative Rule OAR 731-070-0042 to solicit proposals and negotiate agreements for potential public-private partnerships and enroll this project in the Oregon Innovative Partnership Program.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are abbreviating lunch a bit, and how about we come back at 1:30? Excellent. You're hot?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, it is
I thought you were
cold.
doing
No. I'm hungry.
Yeah, I'm hungry too.
Yeah.
It's starting to get a little bit.
So I lost $50,000 earlier this year because somebody hacked my system, and now I just got something that just said undeliverable, and it's the same email account that was in there before. And this guy from the FBI who I've been talking to has been really slow at